Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav, and we will be learning today Mitzvah Hashem Daf Kuf Chaf Tes Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn the halachas of the Daled Minim. A very generous sponsor has dedicated today's share as a schus for those in need of a refuah shalema or a shidduch or parnasa. Everyone should be gebenched. We start today on the top of Kuf Chaf Tes Amid Beis with a new Siman Tov Reish Nun Ches, in which we will be discussing a concept that we've already discussed several times while we were learning the halachas of the Daled Minim, and that is the differences between the first day of Yom Tov and the other days of Yom Tov. So, Siman Tov Reish Nun Ches, Dine Lulav B'Yom Tov Rishon, the halachas of the Lulav and the other Daled Minim on the first day of Yom Tov, Uboy Tes Seifim, and here we have 9 Seifim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph, Min HaTorah, Mida Araisa, Ein Mitzvah Lulav Chutz LaMigdash Ela Yom Rishon. Mida Araisa, the chiyuv of Daled Minim outside of the Beis HaMikdash is only on day 1 of Yom Tov. The rest of the days of Yom Tov, you do not have a chiyuv d'araisa outside of the Beis HaMikdash. V'chachamim tiknu, however, the Chazal were masakin sheyehi nitol b'chol makom kol shiva, that we should take the Daled Minim everywhere all 7 days, and they will masakin this zecher lemigdash. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cotton aleph. Elo Yom Rishon, the chiyuv d'araisa outside of the Beis HaMikdash is only on the first day of Yom Tov. Diksiv, as it says in the pasuk, "U'semachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yamim v'hainu b'migdash." The pasuk says clearly, "U'semachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem shivas yamim." When do you have a mitzvah for 7 days? That's lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, before Hashem your God. And like the Mishnah Berurah says, "V'hainu b'migdash," lifnei Hashem means in the Beis HaMikdash, where the Shechina is Shruya. We should be Zaychet to the Beis HaMikdash b'mehera v'yameinu. Aval b'sha'ar Eretz Yisrael. However, when it comes to the rest of Eretz Yisrael, or indeed Chutz La'aretz, Yom Harishon Belvad, we only have a mitzvah d'araisa on the first day of Yom Tov. Where do we have that mitzvah? Diksiv, because it says in the pasuk, "Ulakachtem lachem b'yom harishon," pre-Eitz Hadar, etc. The pasuk says, when do you have a mitzvah to take the Daled Minim? B'yom harishon. So we have 2 psukim. We have one that says Shivas Hayamim, but that pasuk says Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. So that pasuk is discussing within the precincts of the Beis HaMikdash. There you have a mitzvah saseh d'araisa all 7 days. We have another pasuk Ulakachtem lachem b'yom harishon that mentions only the first day. That is outside the precincts of the Beis HaMikdash. V'chachamim tiknu, the chachamim were mesakin shiva b'chol makom, to take the Daled Minim all 7 days everywhere, zecher lamigdash, as a remembrance to the mitzvah in the Beis HaMikdash. Now there's a very interesting Dirshu footnote over here. Dirshu footnote number 1, a topic that many people aren't aware of, and that is based on a fascinating Rambam in the Pirush Mishnayis LaHarambam. We just learned that there's a mitzvah say d'araisa to take the lulav all 7 days, where Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem, which I very cleverly interpreted as within the precincts of the Beis HaMikdash. What exactly does that mean, within the precincts of the Beis HaMikdash? Is that in the Beis HaMikdash? Is that in the Azara? Is that on the Har HaBayis? Where exactly is that? So if you take a look here in Dirshu footnote number 1, very lengthy footnote. We're not going to go through the whole thing. I'm going to pick out pieces of it. But in the first paragraph in this footnote, Ulegabe Yerushalyim ha'atika, when it comes to the old city of Yerushalyim, Bisman Hazeh, nowadays, Kasav Berurah Yaakov, the Berurah Yaakov writes, Shaladas HaRambam, according to the Rambam, that's to be found in the Pirush Mishnayis LaHarambam in Masechta Sukkah, Paragimel Mishnah Yud, Yerushalayim hi bechlal hamigdash, where he says that Yerushalayim is considered Lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. Yerushalayim is part and parcel of the Migdash in the context of this halacha. Lulav nital b'Yerushalayim gam bisman hazeh min HaTorah kol shiva chutz mishabes. The halacha would be that nowadays in the old city of Yerushalyim, there would be a mitzvah aseh daraisa of daled minim all 7 days of Yom Tov, with the exception of Shabbos. So this halacha, that by the Beis Hamikdash, there's a mitzvah aseh midaraisa of daled minim the entire Yom Tov, it even applies nowadays, according to this Rambam, and it would apply in the old city of Yerushalayim, even though, unfortunately, we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. So if somebody says, is there a chance to be Mekayim the mitzvah aseh daraisa of daled minim on the second day of Yom Tov or the rest of Yom Tov? Great trivia question. The answer isn't, no, nowadays there's only a D'Rabbanan the rest of Yom Tov. It depends. According to the Rambam, in the old city of Yerushalayim, you could have a mitzvah aseh daraisa for the entirety of Yom Tov. V'nafkamina, and how does this make a practical nafkamina? Says does it say here in the footnote? Shebachol makim shemekilim by b'shah hayamim machmas safik d'Rabbanan lahakel. We had many cases where we said that, well, the rest of Yom Tov from day 2 and on, the mitzvah is only d'Rabbanan, and therefore we have a concept of sveika d'Rabbanan lekula. The first one that's jumping into my mind was we had this whole discussion, what happens if you weren't able to take the daled minim during the day? And now it's Ben Hashmashas, and you have a chance to take the daled minim now. So he said the first day, you must take the daled minim even during the Ben Hashmashas period, because Sveika Daraisa L'chumra, and therefore you must take it. The rest of Yom Tov, it's a Sveika D'Rabbanan L'kula. So we had other cases too, where we said that since the mitzvah of daled minim, the rest of Yom Tov is only a D'Rabbanan, we could be mekel, because Sveika D'Rabbanan L'kula. But according to this Rambam in the old city of Yerushalayim, ein lahakel kach b'Yerushalayim, you would not be able to treat the mitzvah as a d'Rabbanan and say sveika d'Rabbanan l'kula, because it may very well be a daraisa. V'chein le'inyan apsulim shehisparu b'siman taf reish mem tes shehem ksherim b'shar hayomim. In Siman taf reish mem tes, we pointed out that there are psulim that are only possible on the first day, and they're not puzzle the rest of the days. So, for example, we said that any psul that puzzles the daled minim because of chaser. We know that we learned out from the pasuk ulakachtem. We learned out that you need a lekichatama. When you take the daled minim, you need a lekichatama. You have to take the daled minim in their fullness, in their entirety. So there's a psul if something is chasar. If the esrog is chasar, it's puzzle. But we said that the psul of chasar, I believe it was a beferish Ramah, it's on Kuf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, the last word of the first line, the chaser kasher b'shar yamim. All of the psulim of chaser, they only apply on the first day. They don't apply on the rest of it. We also had a machlokes when it comes to the psul of hadar. We had a machlokes, does it apply the rest of Yom Tov? So it says here in the footnote, that's another nafkamina, that the chen le'inyan apsulim shehisparu b'siman tafreish mem teshem ksherim b'shar yomim, all of the psulim that we said that they're kosher from day 2 and on, yesh lahachmer b'hem b'Yerushalayim. If you're in the old city of Yerushalayim, you should be machmir, because it's possible that it's a daraisa, according to the Rambam. Ulechein kosav sham, and therefore the Berurah Yaakov writes, Shemisha zoicha lador be'er hakodesh Yerushalayim, somebody who's zoicha to live in Yerushalayim, yechavein kol yoim b'shas ketilas halulav shemekayim es hamitzvah misafik ebachiv hu daraisa hu darabanan. He should have in mind that it could be he's being mekayim a daraisa, not just a darabanan. Okay, now if you go down to the third paragraph, it says over here la halacha lamaisa. Hagoy in Rabbi Yosef Shalom al Yashiv Zatzal nota lahachmir k'divrei Berurah Yaakov. Rabbi Yashiv was machmer like the Berurah Yaakov to treat the mitzvah of daled minim in the old city of Yerushalayim as a daraisa for the whole Yom Tov. V'gam hagoyin Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal b'hi yoser liyad hakoisel b'mei Chag HaSukkos. If Rav Shlomo Zalman Zatzal had the opportunity, if he was going to the koisel during the rest of Yom Tov, so let's say he davened Shachris already outside of the old city, and now later in the day he's going to the Kaisel. Well, now suddenly he comes into the old city of Yerushalayim. In the morning when he was outside the old city of Yerushalayim, he only had a chiyuv d'Rabbanan to take the daled minim, and he took the daled minim by Shachris, and it was Yotze the chiyuv d'Rabbanan. But now suddenly he walks into the into the Ir HaAtika, into Yerushalayim proper, and suddenly now it falls upon him a chiyuv daraisa. So he was makbid hayamahada lito sham lulav b'shenis. He took the lulav and esrog a second time. It doesn't say here if he made a bracha. I'm not going to venture an opinion on that without further research. And if you skip down to the last about 6 lines of this paragraph, V'chein das hagoyin Reb Chaim Kanievsky, he brings down here, he brings down here some shittas that hold. He brings down most notably the Chazon Ish. V'chazon bach mas asafik loy haya noiseya l'Yerushalayim b'chag hasukos af kishoysev sharos lakach. Chazon Ish didn't go to the Old City of Yerushalyim during Sukkot because he didn't want to be machnis himself into this suffix that now maybe he has a chiyuv daraisa. V'chein das hagoyin Reb Chaim Kanievsky she'ein lihikanes l'chiyuv daraisa. You don't want to go to the Old City and suddenly now have a question that maybe you have a chiyuv daraisa on you. Now, why not? What's wrong? Adarabah. My first reaction when I was learning this was, wow, it's kedai to go travel to the Kaisel on Sukkot. Forget just being by the Kaisel, what a schus it is. But look at that. There's a new chiyuv daraisa. Instead of only having a chiyuv daraisa the first day, I could have a chiyuv daraisa all 7 days. How wonderful is that? Says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, not so quick. V'chein das hagoyin Reb Chaim Kanievsky she'ein lihikanes l'chiyuv daraisa. Don't put yourself into a chiyuv daraisa that you do not need to have. Ki yitachen shaha arba minim einam kisherim b'chol hahidurim shetzarich b'daraisa. What if the daled minim that you have aren't really 100% kosher b'daraisa? So now suddenly you're going to have a problem. Nevertheless, if somebody was going to Yerushalayim on Sukkot, Reb Chaim Kanievsky would say, if you already took the daled minim in the morning by Shachris outside of Yerushalayim, bring the daled minim with you when you go to Yerushalayim Ir HaAtika, so now you could take it b'yotzi chiyuv daraisa. Now, I got to mention over here, because again, my first reaction when I was learning this was, wow, I could, what, even more of a reason to go to Yerushalayim. You could go to Yerushalayim and mamish be makayim chiyuv daraisa. Not so quick. And I'll tell you somewhere else where we find this concept. I remember years ago, I was asked to speak before Kol Nidre on Yom Kippur night. And I spoke and I said like this, it's very interesting. Everybody always has the question. Everybody speaks about Kol Nidre, that's such a solemn time coming to Yom Kippur, where we say Kol Nidre, and everybody stands there so solemnly. It's the beginning of Yom Hadin, Oyam V'Noira, the beginning of Yom HaKadosh, and the shots goes up, Kol Nidre, Vesarei, and everybody, is so solemn, and you're wearing your kittel, and you're wearing your talis, which you never do at night. Why on earth do we start Yom Kippur with Kol Nidre? Why don't we start Yom Kippur with Unasana Toikif? You start Yom Kippur with Kol Nidre. It's like this abstract. Nobody really thinks that they made Nedarim, and if they made Nedarim, they were Mati Neder and Erev Rosh Hashanah, and they can't even think of a Neder, and they're not used to Nedarim, and we start off this whole Yom Kippur with Kol Nidre. Why? What is this all about? So I remember when I spoke, I said like this. I said, Kol Nidre, a neder is a fascinating thing. Ask any child, how many mitzvahs are there? Taryag mitzvahs. Everybody knows. You go to any shul, and half of the shuls, when they have their combination, it's taryag, and the other half is the factory default because they never changed it. So everybody knows taryag. Everybody knows 613. But there's a fascinating thing. You have the ability to generate upon yourself new chiyuvei daraisa that never existed. How? You go and you make a neder. Somebody goes ahead and makes a neder, and he asers something on himself like a carbon. He goes ahead, he looks at something, he says, that thing should be aser to me like a carbon. The same way a carbon is aser b'hana, that thing is also going to be aser b'hana. You know what? He just generated an issa daraisa that nobody else has. He has an issa daraisa to have hana from that clock. Nobody else has an issa daraisa to have hana from that clock. He does because he went ahead and he made an eder. So he created a new chiyuv daraisa that never existed upon him before. Now, why did he do it? So maybe he has very good reasons. It's not a clock. It's something else that he used. I don't know. He's afraid that it's going to bring him to a dvar avera. He's afraid he's going to be nichshal, or maybe he was nichshal, and he used his computer not to learn Dirshu, not to learn daf yomi. He used his computer to look at things that he's not supposed to look at, and he really wants to do tshuva, and he wants to create a syug. So he went ahead and he said, that computer, it should be also to me like a carbon. And he made an neder. Now the computer is also to himself, and this is daraisa. He's not allowed to be nene from that computer. If he uses that computer for anything, he's over on this daraisa. So he did it with good intentions, and he created a chiyuv daraisa. Now, what happens if he's nichshal in that neder? Now in Shemayim, they have a double tain on him. Not only were you nichshal in an issa daraisa, you were nichshal in an issa daraisa that you didn't have to have. You don't have enough obligations to Bari Olam? You don't have enough chiyuvim on yourself to Bari Olam? Do you completely keep all of your obligations to Bari Olam? You have to go ahead and take on new ones? So if you go ahead and you voluntarily take on new chiyuvei daraisa, and then you don't fulfill them, that's a much bigger taina on the person than if he was over on stam a daraisa that he's stuck with, so to speak. Like this, the Rebbe Shalom gave you chiyuvei daraisa. You want to go on and you want to take on new ones? You want to go take on voluntary ones when maybe you're not perfect in the ones that you already have that were put upon you at Har Sinai? You have to take on new ones? So too over here. You don't have a chiyuv daraisa of daled minim on the other days of Yom Tov. You have a chiyuv daraisa on the first day of Yom Tov. You want to go ahead, you want to be machnis yourself into chiyuvei daraisa that you don't have. Says Rav Chaim Kanievsky, not so quick. What if you didn't do such a good job picking out your esrig? What if your esrig is taka chosar? What if that little black dot that's on your esrig is not just a fleckle or whatever it is? Maybe it's a hole. Maybe it's a chosar mashahu. If it's chosar mashahu, according to one sheet, it's puzzle. And when the chiyuv is daraisa, chosar is psolma daraisa. So what are you being machnis yourself into a new chiyuv daraisa that you don't have to be machnis yourself in? So this gives you a different perspective on this question. Now let's go to the next paragraph. It's the bottom paragraph in the first column in the Dirshu footnote. Me'idach b'chedusha Reb Meir Simcha docha es divrei Berurah Yaakov. Reb Meir Simcha is doicha the Berurah Yaakov, and he says even according to the Rambam, there's no chiyuv daraisa even in Yerushalayim Ir HaAtika nowadays. The Chen Ha'ira Hagriz Salavechik, the Brisker Rav also passed in that way. She'ein lochush l'chumras Berurah Yaakov, that we don't have to be concerned with the Berurah Yaakov's chumrah. Ubishal Sechuvas Igris Moshe, in the Igris, the Yeshivas Atzal says, Sha'afilu l'das HaRambam, even according to the Rambam, Ha'chiv daraisa shel netilas lulav kol shiva, hu rak bebeis hamikdash, v'loi b'Yerushalayim. The Yeshivas Atzal concludes in the Tshuva that the Chiv Daraisa, even according to the Rambam, is only in the Beis Hamikdash and not in Yerushalayim Ir HaAtika. Okay, weiter. Siv Beis, second line in the Shulchan Aruch. B'yayim Shabbos einay noitel. On Shabbos we do not take the daled minim, afilu imhu yom rishon, even if it's the first day when the Chiv is Daraisa. Says the Mishnah Beis, einay noitel, we do not take the daled minim. On Shabbos Kain, Tiknu Chachamim, the Chachamim were masakin, that even on the first day when you have a chiyuv daraisa, we should not take the daled minim on Shabbos, mishum gzeira, because of a gzeira, shema yitlenu biyadai, maybe we will inadvertently take the daled minim outside, v'yavirenu arba amos b'rishos harabim, and be over chas v'chalila on the issa daraisa of hoitzah by carrying the daled minim outside daled amos in a rishos harabim. Now the question right away that everybody jumps up and asks, how could the Chachamim be masakin that you should not be makayim a chiyuv daraisa? You have a chiyuv daraisa. How could the Chachamim be masakin not to be makayim your mitzvah saseh daraisa? And the answer is a rule that we say all over Shas, that yesh koyach biyad Chachamim. The Chazal had the power to make a takana and to tell you not to be makayim even a da'araisa if it's b'sheva al taisa. They're not telling you to go against a da'araisa bekum va'asei. The Chacham didn't say that you should actively be over on an issa da'araisa, transgress an issa da'araisa. Rather, what the Chachamim said was, in order to create a siyag for Shabbos, to protect somebody against chas v'chalila being mechal Shabbos, you should refrain from being mekayim a chiyuv da'araisa b'sheva al taisa, passively. You just sit back and don't be mekayim it, but you're not doing anything actively become va'aseh. Okay, back to the Shulchan Aruch, second line, the words of the Ramah, Haga, va'aser letaltel haluluv b'Shabbos. The lulav and the hadassim and the aravas. We're not talking here about the esrik. The lulav bundle, the lulav, the hadassim, and the aravas are also letaltel. You're not allowed to move them on Shabbos. They are muktzah on Shabbos. Continues the Ramah, why are they muktzah? Tehevi ke'even, because they're similar to a stone. What does that mean? It means, we know there are different categories of muktzah. The lulav, the hadassim, and the aravas are muktzah machmas gufay. They are intrinsically muktzah like eitzim va'avonim, like sticks and stones, items that have absolutely no Shabbos usage. These are things that are not muchan, they're not prepared for use on Shabbos, eitzim va'avonim. You go out to your backyard, there are stones and sticks laying out. Those are not muchan for any kind of use. Therefore, they're muktzah machmas gufay. Muktzah machmas gufay is a very stringent type of muktzah. There are types of muktzah, let's say a hammer. A hammer is muktzah. Why is a hammer muktzah? Because it's not muchan for Shabbos use, because it's a kli shemalachtoy le'isr. It's a keli that's made to be used for purposes that are also on Shabbos. You use a hammer for construction activities. Construction activities are not Shabbos activities. Therefore, a hammer is muktzah. However, the fact is that a hammer could have a Shabbos usage too. And that is, if you have some walnuts at home and you're having a shalom zachar and you want to prepare some walnuts, you could take the hammer to break open the walnuts. It's a perfectly legitimate use for a hammer. It's not the default usage, it's not the expected usage. And therefore the hammer is muktzah. But if you want to use it, if you have a tzarech, it's muktzah, but you have tzarech gufay or mekaymai, if you have a need to use the hammer for a usage that's permitted, like opening walnuts, you're allowed to use the hammer. Or if the hammer is sitting on a chair in the dining room and you need the chair for somebody to sit on, so that's tzarech mekaymai. You want to move the hammer because you need the place that the hammer is in, you're allowed to move the hammer. You could pick it up, take it downstairs to the basement, and put it on the tool shelf. So that's when it comes to a muktzah, like muktzah, because it's a klisha malachta l'isr. But something that's muktzah machmas gufay, like eitzim va'avonim, you're not allowed to move them, even tzarech mekaymai or tzarech gufay. Let's say you need a doorstop. You're not allowed to go outside to the backyard and pick up a rock because you want to use it as a doorstop on Shabbos. Why? Because when we see a rock in the backyard, we don't look at it as, oh yeah, it has a perfectly legitimate use on Shabbos to use as a doorstop. No, most people don't go outside to the backyard and pick up rocks. It's not a common usage. A hammer is made for banging things. A rock is not made to be a doorstop. So if you're making it before Shabbos, if you pick up a rock before Shabbos and you say, I'm using this as a doorstop, then it's muchan for Shabbos usage. But if not, you can't pick it up on Shabbos and decide you want to use it as a doorstop. Says the Ramah over here, your lulav and your hadassim and your aravas are muktzah machmas gufay kemay dehevi ke'even. That's what the Ramah means when he says it's like a stone. It's muktzah machmas gufay. It's muktzah machmas gufay, and it's also even tzarech mekaymai and tzarech gufay. The reason I gave this whole hakdama is because that's what the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah's cut in Gimel halulav. When the Ramah said that you're not allowed to move the lulav, hu hadin ha'arava isfa ha'hadasim, he's referring to the entire lulav bundle, the lulav, the hadassim, and the aravas. Is cut in dalet dehevi ke'even. And these are usher to move even tzarech gufay and tzarech mekaymai because they're muktzah machmas gufay. And in this way, the lulav and the hadassim and the aravas are not similar to another chayfet shel mitzvah, to a shofar. The sharinon besides Siman Tov Kuf Peiches if hey, we learned at Siman Tov Kuf Peiches that you're allowed to move the shofar on Shabbos. The shofar you're allowed to move tzarech gufay or tzarech mekaymai. Deshani hasam, the shofar is different to have a keli, because we consider the shofar, interestingly enough, to be a keli. Davar. It is able to be used for something. Kilishoiv boy. You could scoop up water. Put your thumb over the narrow end and you have a keli. You could scoop up water. You could pour water with it. Masha enken hacha de eitz ba'almahu. Masha enken by the lulav, the hadassim, and the aravas. All it is a branch. That's all it is. It's not a keli of any kind. Now, even with the shofar, there is a potential, and I'm trying to remember if we discussed this over there. I think we might have discussed it over there. There's also a potential over there of muktzah machmas chisaron kis. If you're worried about the shofar, that the shofar might get damaged and you would never use it for something else, then it would also be muktzah machmas chisaron kis, which would also give it the status that it would be aser even tzarech gufay and tzarech mekaymai. Okay, weiter in the Ramah, 3 lines down near the end of the line. So far we spoke about the lulav and the hadassim and the aravas, but we didn't mention the esrig. Says the Ramah, avala esrig mutter betiltel. The esrig is not muktzah on Shabbos. The esrig is mutter in tiltel on Shabbos. Why? The ra'i lahariach bay, because it has a use, and that use is that you could smell it. We all know that the esrig has a beautiful reach, it has a beautiful scent, and therefore you could smell it. Now let's remember, this is a topic that we spoke about earlier. We spoke about smelling the hadassim and smelling the haravas. Now, smelling the esrig. Now the hadas, we said, you're not allowed to smell the hadas for the entirety of Yom Tov. You're not allowed to use the hadas to smell it. Why? Because we said that the ikar usage of a hadas all year round, what is the ikar usage of a hadas? For its reach. Therefore, when you set aside a hadas for a mitzvah, once it's huktzah l'mitzvasai, once you set it aside for its use as a mitzvah, you are maktzeh it, you remove it from its default usage, which is reach. So now that it's huktzah l'mitzvasai, it's no longer available for smelling, and you're not allowed to smell it all Yom Tov long. Therefore, even on Shabbos, it's not usable for reach, and therefore it's also betiltel, therefore it's muktzah. But the esrig, we said, you're allowed to smell the esrig the rest of Yom Tov. Why? It's also huktzah l'mitzvasai. So we said the difference is that the default usage of an esrig all year round is not for its reach. The default usage of a fruit is for achila. So when you're matzeh l'mitzvasai, it becomes also for eating all 7 days of Yom Tov, but not for smelling. Therefore, technically, it's available for smelling. Since it's available for smelling, it doesn't become muktzah, because it's muchan. It's available for use to smell it. So therefore, says the Ramah, avala esrig mutter betiltel, the ra'il lahariach bay, because you're allowed to smell it. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ois katan hey, the ra'il lahariach bay. Now, even though we did say in Taf Reish Nun Gimel that even though technically you are allowed to smell the esrig all Yom Tov long, because even though it's huktzah l'mitzvasai, it's not removed for its use for smelling, still the Mechaber said sheyesh lim noyam elo riach boi. Still the Mechaber said better don't smell it. Why? Because we have a suffix bracha. It's true that the fact that it's huktzah l'mitzvasai doesn't aser it for reach, so you're allowed to smell it. But could you make a bracha? Why? What's the shaila? Because we said when it comes to something that has a pleasant aroma, you only make a bracha to smell it if that's what it stands to be used for. But we said, let's say you have spices in a storage room that you use to add to food, but you don't use it for reich. You have paprika in your closet. You have black pepper in your kitchen cabinet. You have cinnamon in your kitchen cabinet. Cinnamon, a beautiful smell of cinnamon. But you don't use it to smell it. When's the last time you went over to your kitchen cabinet, took out the cinnamon, opened it up, and yum. No, you don't do that. It's there as a cooking spice. Therefore, if you smell it, you don't make a bracha on it. Well, what's the status of an esrog on Yom Tov? Do you have an esrog to smell it? No, you have an esrog for the mitzvah. So now we have like a suffix. Should we make a bracha? Should we not make a bracha? Therefore, the Mechaber said, better don't smell it. So now, what the Mishnah Berurah is saying is like this. The Ramah just said that the esrog is not muktzah. Why isn't the esrog muktzah on Shabbos? Because, what do you mean? You can smell it. What do you mean? The Mechaber said, better don't smell it. So says the Mishnah Berurah, "Va'af shekasav ha'mechaber besides Siman Tov Reish Nun Gimel sheyesh limnoyam el hariach by that it's better to refrain from smelling it. Hainu b'shashu not like lotzeis by. That's only true when you're taking the daled minim for the mitzvah. You go to shul with the daled minim, don't go smell it because right now the esrog is here for mitzvah purposes. It's not here for smelling. Oy al kol panim shu yom chayil, or at least during the weekday days of Yom Tov, meaning non-Shabbos days, even on Yom Tov, if Yom Tov is Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, as long as Yom Tov is not Shabbos, on those days, the esrog is there, you have it for mitzvah purposes. So you have this suffix now of a bracha, should you make a bracha or not, if you smell it, therefore the Mechaber says don't smell it. Because on those days you could use it for the mitzvah, suffix bracha, and then we have a suffix bracha, so therefore don't smell it. But on Shabbos of Sukkot, she'einenu noitlon, where you are not going to use the esrog for the mitzvah, in that case, esrog, go ahead, beautiful smell. Take it, make a bracha on it. No suffix, because it's not here for mitzvah use today. You're not going to be mekayim the mitzvah with it today. And therefore it's not muktzah. Another cute chap why the esrog is not muktzah. Because you know what? The truth is, even though the Mechaber said that you should refrain from smelling the esrog on Yom Tov because of the suffix bracha, there's a way out. You can even buy another esrog. Buy a puzzle esrog. Go to the esrog seicher, buy a puzzle esrog. And you know what this esrog is for? This esrog is for smelling. And now on Yom Tov, take it, make a bracha, shenasan reich tov beperos, gevaldik, and then take your mitzvah esrog and smell your mitzvah esrog too. You made a bracha on the other esrog, and you had in mind this esrog too. Therefore, for all these reasons, the esrog is not muktzah on Shabbos. Says the Ramah weiter, 4 lines down. Va'aser litnai al habeged. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Says the Ramah, you're not allowed to put the esrog down on a beged. So, you come home from shul and you're holding your esrog, for some reason you don't have it in the box, or you go out to the sukkah and different people are picking up the daled minim and they're using it to be yotze the mitzvah, your wife, your kids, and sometimes in between people you have to put the esrog down. Don't put the esrog down on a beged. Afilu b'Yom Tov, even on Yom Tov, forget Shabbat, even on Yom Tov, do not put the esrog down on a beged. Why? De moilid reicha, because by putting the esrog down on the beged, you are infusing that beged with the beautiful aroma of the esrog. Why is that a problem? Says the Mishnah Berurah cut involved. B'Yom Tov, avamuta litnai ala beged oimuchin shahayamunach by me erev Yom Tov. If you had a beged that you already had the esrog on before Yom Tov, or you have, let's say, that flax. I know people are looking at the camera right now, the computer screen, and saying, flax? Well, what are you talking about, Rabbi Weiss? Yeah, for those of us my age or older, we all remember when the esrogim came wrapped up in flax. Now they come in styrofoam. And every time I look at it, I'm like, To me, it's almost a bizoyan mitzvah. The esrog is in styrofoam. What do you mean? It's supposed to be wrapped up in flax. So if you had some kind of a beged or flax that the esrog was already in before Yom Tov, you could put the esrog back on that on Yom Tov, shekvar kol hatareach, because that's already infused with the aroma, with the scent of the esrog. The problem over here is infusing a new beged with the scent of the esrog. And why is that a problem? Because you're infusing the pleasant aroma into the beged, the heavy ketikun moneh. And this is a makabepatish problem. This is tikkun moneh. You're improving and fixing that beged. Mashma, the implication is even if you did this without kavana, it's still aser. Even if that was not your intent, it's aser. Because it's efsher. It's not possible that the smell will not go into the garment. They have a psik reisha, and therefore it's a psik reisha. And a psik reisha is aser. A davar she'enim iskaven is aser on Shabbos if it's a psik reisha. V'yesh b'kilin bazer. There are those who are mekel hechadein mechaven if it's a davar she'enim iskaven. If it's a pressing circumstance, you have nowhere else safe to put the esrog. After the yesh lismach hamakilin, the Mishnah Berurah says maybe you could be saimach on those who are mekel, since it's a davar she'enoi miskaving. You see, the things that you would never dream have an isser to them if you didn't take out a Mishnah Berurah and learn the halachas. Okay, Siv Gimel. Another concept that we have discussed quite a bit since we started learning the halachas of the minim. Ein adam yoytze yedei chavasai b'yom rishon belulav shel chaveroi shehish iloi. You cannot be yoytze. You cannot fulfill the mitzvah of minim on the first day of Yom Tov when you have a chiyuv da'araisa on a lulav on minim that belonged to somebody else that you borrowed. Why not? D'be'inon lochem. Because the pasuk says the lakachtem lochem. It has to be yours. Mishel lochem. It has to be minim that belong to you. You borrowed it from somebody, it's very nice, but who does it belong to? It doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the owner, and therefore, on the first day, when you have a chiyuv daraisa, you can't be yotze the mitzvah with a borrowed lulav. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kotneches, Ein Adam Yotze. Let's say you didn't have daled minim, so you went over to your neighbor who you know has daled minim, and you went over there to borrow it. Now you were going to borrow it, kedasu kedin. You were going to borrow it. You're going to say, listen, it's day one, I need lochem. So you were going to ask him to give it to you, matana amanas lahachzir. He's going to give it to you with a real matana, so it should belong to you. You'll use it to be yotze the mitzvah, and you'll fulfill the requirement of lochem, and then you will give it back to him. That's what your intent was. But what happens? Let's say your neighbor's not home. And now his wife, the woman of the house, gives the lulav to one of her husband's friends, or to one of his relatives, bimatana. She said, she's not an amoritz, she knows that the first day of Yom Tov you need lachem. So she says, I'm giving it to you b'matana, don't worry. Says the Chavis Chaim, lo yotza. You're not yotza. Teshema lo nichalei ki im b'mechira. Who says that her husband was maskim to give it b'matana? Maybe her husband will only maskim to sell it. He'll sell it to you for $25, but, he's not maskim to the matana. Im lo yishehu adam choshev, unless the one that the wife gave it to was the Rosh Yeshiva. If it was the Rav or it was the Rosh Yeshiva, if it was an Adam Chashiv, the Zila Be Milsa Lamachrai, it was the type of person that the husband would have never said, I'll sell it to him. It wouldn't pass. It's somebody his zicha would give it to. Then shari, then it's mutar and you could be yoitza. Why? The oz amdinon daite, because then amdinon means we evaluate. The oz amdinon daite, we evaluate that the husband's das would be the nichale, that he agrees with his wife giving the esrig as a matana. Amdinon, we have a word umdana. There's an umdana. That means that we evaluated his das and we decided halachically that that's the das of the owner. The Berurah Yaakov the Berurah Yaakov asks on this Magen Avram, the haloi b'lavachi gamkein kaimelon the nichalel in the shlakay mitzvah b'mamoinei. And the truth is, we already dealt with this earlier on. We had this conversation earlier on in the Mishnah Berurah. The Magen Avram says, wait a second. We know that we have a rule we always say that nichale le'inish lekayem mitzvah b'mamoynei. You're allowed to go into your neighbor's sukkah and use your neighbor's sukkah without asking him permission first, if he's not there. Why? Because nichale le'inish lekayem mitzvah b'mamoynei. A person is very happy that his property and his assets should be used in the kiyum of a mitzvah. So why don't we say over here, okay, the wife gave the esrig to the neighbor. The wife gave the dal minim to the neighbor. Why don't we have an umdana that nichale le'inish lekayem mitzvah b'mamoynei? That the husband is going to be very happy that the neighbor is going to have the dal minim and be yotzei the mitzvah with his dal minim. So it should be mutter to not forget if the wife gave it to you. The Berurah Yaakov is asking, I don't understand. You should be allowed to go and take your neighbor's daled minim without the rishus of the wife, without anybody's rishus, because nichale le'inish lekayem mitzvah b'mamoynei. Ubikam makayim lo'imahani sfarzu rak le'inyan shara yomim. But they come to the conclusion that this only works on the rest of the days of Yom Tov, not the first day. Because the rest of Yom Tov, it's okay, so you borrowed it. And we tell you you're allowed to borrow it without the das of the owner, because nichale le'inish lekayem mitzvah b'mamoynei. But v'lo le'inyan yom harishon. But it doesn't work for the first day, debi'inon lachem, when there's a requirement of ownership, a requirement of lachem. And the truth is, we learned this earlier in Taf Reish Mem Tes Sif Hey. That's on the bottom. Where did it go? See, I would refer you to the bottom line in the Shulchan Aruch at Kuf Chaf Amud Aleph to Taf Reish Mem Tes Sif Beis, where the Mechaber says, "V'chein sha'ol b'yom rishon." You can't be yotzei with a borrowed lulav on the first day, mishum debi'inon lachem, because of the requirement of lachem. And in the Mishnah Berurah over there, Ois Katan Tezvav, which starts on the bottom line of Kuf Chaf Amud Aleph, he brings down the Magen Avram, and he says that on the first day you have to spell out that you're giving it to him as a matan amanas la'atzir. But without that, it's not enough. Unless, okay, we're going to learn this now. He says like this. So v'loy le'inyan yom harishon debi'inon lachem. Kedili salabel b'sim tafresh b'em tesivei. V'emkein my mahani madanoy madanichale. The first day, it doesn't help to say nichale le'inish lekayem mitzvah b'mamoynei. Haloy mikol mokem einish shaloi mamish. Nichale le'inish lekayem mitzvah b'mamoynei. The owner of the daled minim is happy for you to be mekayem the mitzvah with his property. He's happy for you to borrow it. But it doesn't say anywhere that he's happy to give it to you. And you need lachem. In order for you to become the mitzvah, it has to be yours. Nichale le'inish l'kayem mitzvah b'mamoynei does not mean that the owner is ready to give it to you. It means he's ready to allow you to use his. So that's why it doesn't work on the first day. It works on the other days, but not on the first day. Even a woman who does work in the house, she does business in the house, she can't give away the husband's mammon. Even if the husband comes on later and says, oh, you gave my dal minim to Yaakov? Okay, yeah, fine, I'm not makbid. Doesn't matter. When you took it, it wasn't yours. So you would have to take the dal minim again. So again, in short, Sif Ois Katan Ches in the Mishnah Berurah here, what did the Chavetz Chaim say? What he said over here was, the first day, you need lachem. Since you need lachem, you can't be yotzei with daled minim that are borrowed. What happens if you went to borrow it and the wife was home and the husband wasn't and the wife gave it to you? No, that's not good enough, because she doesn't have the right to give it away. She can't give it to you so that it should be yours. Even if he comes home later and he says he was fine with it, you still were not yotzei. Why don't we say nichale le'inish l'kayem mitzvah b'mamoynei? Because that still does not make it lachem. And here we go to something I was just referring to before. Hamagid Avram Hoichiach. The Magen Avram proves we have a rule. What if somebody wants to marry a woman and he lost the ring? Oh, he doesn't have a ring. So he goes over to somebody and he says, quick, lend me your watch. I want to use your watch in order to use it to marry my wife. I'm going to use your watch. I'm going to give it to her for Kedushin. Now, listen to what he said. He said, can I borrow your watch? He didn't say, give me your watch. Can I borrow your watch? Why? Why do you need a watch? You're wearing a watch. I needed to marry a woman. So what was spelled out over here? The guy said, I want to borrow the watch, but he said that he wants to borrow the watch in order to marry a woman. It says, Da'amrinan shehimu kudeshes. In Shulchan Aruch and Even Ezer, Siman Chavches, Sif Yod Tes, we say it works. The marriage is a good marriage. Well, why? We all know you go under the chuppah and the Masada Kedushin looks at you and says, the ring is yours, right? You paid for it, right? Right? You bought it. You paid for it. It's yours, right? Because if it's not yours, the Kedushin is not a good Kedushin. But over here, you borrowed a watch. You didn't buy a watch. You didn't say, give me the watch. You borrowed a watch. How can you affect Kedushin with a borrowed watch? And the answer is, Mishum Amrinan, you spelled out to the lender, I want to borrow your watch in order to marry a woman. So the lender, the one who's giving you the watch, understands. He also got married and had a Masada Kedushin who drove him crazy and made sure he paid for the watch. So he understands that you want a watch to affect Kedushin. And he knows that if you want a watch to affect Kedushin, that means that the watch has to be yours. So he means to give it to you for the purpose that you want it for. So therefore he's giving it to you as a matan amanas la'aser. Im kein hu adin be'esrik. So the Magen Avram says, so the same thing applies to an esrik, or daled minim. Im hish'iloi lotzeis boy. You came to shul, and you didn't have your daled minim on the first day Yom Tov. So you looked at your chaver and you said, can I borrow your daled minim in order to be yotzei? Then even though he did not spell out that I'm giving it to as a matana manas la'aser, even though you said I want to borrow it, and he lent it to you, but you spelled out, I want it in order to be yotzei. So he gave it to you in the manner that you need to receive it in order to be able to be yotzei. So this is a dispute amongst the Achronim. If this happened, you should take it again without a bracha. And this is what I was referring to in Taf Reish Mem Tes Sif Beis, Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Beis, where he speaks about this. And he says, the Magen Avram says that b'di'eved, certainly you should spell out that you're giving your chaver the daled minim as a matana amanas la'aser. But if you did not spell that out, but you said I'm giving it to you so that you could be mekayim the mitzvah, b'di'eved that works. Okay? Very nice. Baruch Hashem, with the completion of this share, we are now back onto the Dirshu schedule. So thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan on Gans Klal Yisrael. The Rabban Shalom should say, Yeshua's refuas parnasa sheduchim, to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the Bias Tzedek b'meherav yameinu. Amen. Be well.